we can have that discussion. That wraps it up. Remember, the fun never ends unless you let it. So don't let it. Alrighty, welcome back to this video series. I hope this has worked better. It's been a lot of work. Again, that's what they pay me for, is to make things work better. So I'm not seeking your sympathy. I'm just hoping that it's been what it's intended to be and not just a waste of time and not unhelpful. All right, this is actually the second edition of this video series for non-renewable resources. Many weeks ago, I had some extra time at a recording venue to discuss this, so I did the first one there. Okay, so you'll see when you go over this. Now that you're looking at this, you'll see, wow, it's got a different shirt on and a different tie. It looks different. There's not an easel next to him, and there's not something behind him, and all I can see is from the just below the top of his tie to his head. Well, anyway, I'm at a different venue today than where I recorded the first round for non-renewable resources number 1. Okay, so this is non-renewable resources number 2, and we're going to start that off by talking about recycling and how that fits into the overall picture for non-renewable resources. Obviously, what it does is it increases the amount that can be used. Maybe not as obviously. It doesn't make that amount infinite. Might seem that it does, right? If we had a recycling rate of 100%, of course we'd only have to take a little bit out of the ground. We could just reuse that forever. Sadly, in some utopian sense, I guess at least, sadly that's not economically rational to do that. Why is that? Well, because every time we go through a round of use of something, it tends to get scattered and dissipated and whatever. It's all over the place. So collecting it all back again and putting it where it needs to be reused is just not good economics. It's just not wise. It's not worth what it costs beyond some point, some quantity. All right, so the recycling rate's not going to be 100%. Unless it's 100%, the resource is still finite, right? A non-renewable resource is finite. It doesn't grow from natural processes or in any way that's economical for humans in a time frame meaningful to humans, right? So it's at least conceivable to run out of it because there's a finite amount, okay? But some of it we can recycle, so we can extend the use of it beyond the amount that we take out of the ground, okay? But not to infinite levels. All right, so I've got a little equation here, and I've gotten smart. Right? Instead of using these big, giant pieces of paper that I have to hide behind, I got a smaller piece of paper. I can just move it closer to the screen. Okay, you can still read that, right? Okay, so the total amount of something that we can available to use is equal to 1 minus the recycling rate times the amount that we mine from the ground. Okay, or if it's something we don't mine from the ground, from wherever we get it from, cutting trees down or something. Okay, so we recycle paper as well, but like the raw pulp is then in competition with recycled paper. All right, so I'll just leave that up there. It doesn't hurt anything. Just tilt my head to one side a little bit. All right, so 1/1 minus the recycling rate times the amount that we use from the ground. So let's just plug some numbers into that recycling rate, and see how that affects things. Let's say the recycling rate, for whatever reason, good or bad, but just we observe that it's 20%. Okay, so the recycling rate, you plug into the 2 little r's there. Okay, those little r's. Oops, fingers are blocking. Right, 20% recycling rate means that's 0.2. Don't put a 20 in there, you'll get absurd results. Okay, recycling rate as a decimal. Okay, so 1 minus 0.2 is 0.8, and 1/0.8 is 1.25. Oh, wow. We're only going to have 25% more to use than we actually extract from the ground. So if we take 100 tons out of the ground, we'll be able to use it like we took 125 out of the ground and didn't reuse it. Oh, well, that didn't help much for the non-renewability of it. Yeah. Well, most things, the recycling rates are pretty low. We'll get into that in a minute. And part of the story there is that recycling often, typically I think, has marginal social benefits more than marginal private benefits. Right? But in many cases that isn't recognized in the form of a subsidy. Right? If we subsidize it, that would increase the recycling rate. So if we fail to subsidize it when it's economically efficient to do so, we'll have an inefficiently low recycling rate and thus an inefficiently low difference between the amount we can use versus the amount we can take out of the ground. And we may have an inefficiently large amount we pop out of the ground, an inefficiently large mining rate as a result. You see, you get one thing wrong and it just kind of cascades through the system and creates mini failures everywhere, or suboptimalities nearly everywhere. Okay, let's just do a couple more just to kind of get a better feel for it. A 0.5, a 50% recycling rate, that's pretty high. There's a few things we do better than that, but not too many. And again, it might be because we don't provide the optimal subsidy to recycling, but maybe even if we do, we might not get more than a 50% recycling rate. So 1 minus 0.5 is 0.5, and 1 over 0.5 is 2. So even with a pretty good 50% recycling rate of, we're talking post-consumer here. So we make a product with some product, say steel, and so it gets made into a bunch of different things, and it goes all over to different people, to different places all over the place. Different people. Anyway, I'm a little redundant there. And they use the product for a while, and then whatever, they throw it away or submit it for recycling, and somehow 50% of it gets back into production to make other products, steel products. Yeah, I hope by going through that you thought, yeah, that's going to be pretty tough, pretty expensive to collect back all that steel that went all over everywhere. And who knows how people disposed of it, whether they actually just submitted it for recycling. Because here's another issue that we're going to discuss. Maybe they had no motivation other than warm fuzzies to do the recycling. See, that's the way most of our waste disposal is incentivized. Right? Most waste disposal systems for consumers are just, hey, haul your trash out to the curb and we'll pick it up and haul it off to the landfill. Okay? So what you're paying for typically is a flat fee for trash disposal service. Why not be charged by the number of bags or trash cans full, or the weight of it, or the cubic feet that it is if it's compressed? Well, if you can think why that is, that would really slow down the trash pickup process. Or maybe not. Maybe there's some room for innovation. Maybe those little grabbers that grab onto your trash can, at least in San Antonio. I can get my hand on the screen here. Those little tongs there. Maybe those clever innovators out there could build something into those so that when they grab your trash can, they can instantly sense the volume that weight represents when compacted into the landfill. I wouldn't have a clue as to how to do that. But somewhere out there is somebody that is maybe thinking about it now, maybe even figured it out. Now they're just trying to figure out how to make it cost effective. Then we could do that, right? Then we could efficiently charge for waste disposal services, which would incentivize recycling. I'm going to put this card down now because I think we've kind of gotten the picture. Even 50% recycling only doubles the amount we can use versus the amount we extract from the earth. So really high recycling rates are relatively rare because, wow, collect all that stuff back is pretty low. So I want to minimize the potential for innovation because it's unbelievably awesome, what people have invented. And if you told somebody just 10 or 15 years ago that most people would be walking around looking at a phone most of the time that would tell them almost everything, which restaurant to go to, where they could shop, what the latest news is. I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago they wouldn't have been that amazed, but certainly early in my childhood it was utterly unthinkable. I thought it was cool when I had a transistor radio. Back in the 60s, something I could hold up to my ear and listen to Feeling Groovy as I walked down the boardwalk in Laguna Beach. And I'm still sort of there because I'm kind of a technophobe, and I'm not one of those people that's kind of hooked to my cell phone and trying to get in, trying to gather all my information to that. Okay, so that leads us to our second issue here with recycling, and that is that we want to figure out what the optimal recycling fee, recycling subsidy is. How do we know what the difference between marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit is? Well, when somebody recycles something, of course, there's a marginal private benefit to them, and of course, there's the warm fuzzies, and so those are hard to quantify. But that's obviously real because a lot of recycling occurs without any payment to the person doing the recycling, just because it feels good to put it in the blue can rather than the black can, and knowing that it'll be picked up. But I can tell you that it doesn't feel good enough to enough people to make it a huge percentage. And I can tell you that from direct observation from where I live. We have a garage apartment behind our house. We have a tenant, and he puts his recycling and his trash in the same receptacles we do before we haul them onto the curb. When I haul our trash out, I often see his recyclables mixed in with his trash in our trash can. Now, do I take the time to rip apart his trash bags among the goo to pull his cans and bottles and cardboard and paper out of there and move it over to the blue can? And no. I mean, it feels terrible too, because, I may be a radical right-wing environmentalist. Remember, you know what that means. It doesn't mean I'm really radical or right-wing, but compared to the traditional perception of an environmentalist being kind of on the left end of the political spectrum. But I'm definitely still an environmentalist. It hurts to see that stuff in there, but I'm still, in a sense, economically rational. It isn't worth my time and discomfort and potential infections and whatever I can get from putting my hands in his trash to be worth it. I have done it some, I confess. Okay, sometimes if it looks easy to get his bottles and cans, I take the time. It's all wrapped in there and there's gunk and goo around it. The marginal cost is more than my marginal benefit. You see, that's where the cycling subsidy comes in. What if I were to be paid to achieve that additional recycling? Well, maybe not a lot, maybe a little bit. Some eerie presence would detect every time I pull a bottle or can out of his trash and put it in the blue can. Ka-ching, ka-ching, and that would generate a check to me at some future time. Well, that would definitely push me in the direction of, it doesn't look all that gooey and gunky in his trash bag where that bottle or can is. Well, all right. See, everything's marginal, right? Now, it may be in there with a bunch of broken glass and really smelly, yucky stuff. Maybe some dog poop got in there, and I'm saying, at that recycling subsidy, I'm still not getting in there. Oh, you say the recycling subsidy is $100 a bottle now? I'm tearing apart the bottle. I'll put gloves on. I'll take the time. I'll move the bottle. You get the idea that, it depends on the price, right? Okay, so the recycling subsidy is just another signal from society how important it is to do something, right? So what is the optimal recycling subsidy from an efficiency perspective? Of course, optimal, that's what that means. The difference between marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit. So what's that difference, that external benefit? Well, let's see, when you recycle, you get some benefits. Again, you might be paid something to do that, your warm fuzzies. Okay, but on top of that, you reduce the rate at which the landfill fills. Okay, you're not compensated for that. You're still going to pay your flat fee for your trash pickup. Okay, and if taxes go down, because the landfill, everybody's taxes go down, not just yours. Right? The city doesn't keep track of who did the most to minimize their trash and who did the least, and well, you did more than you did, and so we'll lower your taxes. No, they don't do that. Tax rate's the same for everybody. Okay, so excuse me, my mouth suddenly got dry and I've become almost speechless. Okay, so the optimal recycling is the difference marginal social benefit, marginal private benefit, should reflect the degree to which the uncompensated effects of recycling yield certain benefits, like the landfill filling more slowly, and the rate at which resources are extracted, that's reduced by recycling. Okay, those are all benefits. Recycling, having resources available from that process, also increases the competitiveness of that industry, say the gold or the silver industry or the copper industry or something. That's what I mean by industry, right? The recycled stuff is there being sold alongside the stuff that comes from mines, and that can be important in some cases because there may not be that many mines of some items, so not many sources. So adding a producer of it can be significant in terms of its social value. And it may be the case, may not be, but it may be the case that the recycling process has fewer spillover costs, damages that result from that process. You think, what? Have you ever been next to a recycling plant? I haven't been next to one very often. And I'm not looking forward to the next time because they're ugly. Oh, they're ugly. At least the few that I've seen. There's nothing pretty about the recycling process, and one of it is the most massive junkyard you have ever seen. Piles and piles of just about everything. You know, if you live anywhere close to that, it is an ugly sight. In between that, you know, next to that is a building with smokestacks that are doing things because they've got to melt and do things to that stuff, that raw material that's been used, and now they're going to reuse it. And, you know, those are they're not pretty. But despite that, despite the fact that recycling yields significant emissions, okay, policy relevant externalities in some cases, those might not be as bad as the emissions that come from the mining process. We experienced one of those last summer. I don't know if you followed the news in August. Remember that yellow river that started in Colorado that lasted a few weeks? Maybe even more than that. The news coverage didn't last more than a couple of weeks. Yeah. Of all things, this spill, this pollution, okay, this mining-related externality resulted from an EPA visit, Environmental Protection Agency, federal government, resulted from an EPA visit to a gold mine in Colorado. As a result of something that they did at that mine, a dam burst, something that was holding back a pond, a lake full of wastes, burst. Apparently it was under some pressure, and some part of the thing that was holding it back was weakened. Boom, out it went, and of course the mines are usually up on a hill. The water went downhill, and not H2O water but water full of bad things, and it went into a creek, which went into a river, which went into another river, and those are all tributaries of the Colorado River. Okay, so all those rivers were contaminated for a while. I happened to be out there for a while during that time, and people that were in southwestern Colorado, southeastern Utah, drank bottled water for a while, and for more than a little while if they were worried about some of those things not having been flushed downriver, but lingering on the parts of the river where they extracted their water. Ultimately, it went into Lake Powell, right? That's part of it used to be the Colorado River. And the tributary of Lake Powell, of the Colorado River, the San Juan River, there had those mining wastes in them. So a tributary of the San Juan River flowed into the San Juan River, and the San Juan River flowed into the Colorado River, which at that point had been made into Lake Powell by a dam. And so now all those wastes are at the bottom of Lake Powell somewhere, and I'm only an economist, not a hydrologist. So there, the bad stuff, Lake Powell doesn't look yellow. Okay, maybe dilution was the solution to pollution in the big lake. Maybe the stuff that's made it yellow is kind of filtered out of the water and sitting at the bottom of Lake Powell now, and maybe it'll rest in peace down there. I don't know. Anyway, probably an overkill story to illustrate the point that mining-related externalities that can be prevented or made less likely by recycling may be worth maybe more than the spillovers that result from the recycling processes. Anyway, so we have a list of things that cause us to believe that the marginal social benefit is more than the marginal private benefit. And then, so subsidy then would be appropriate. We shouldn't just recycle if recycling pays for itself. Okay, we should recycle up to the point where it pays for itself plus the subsidy. Okay, so up to the marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost of recycling, not just up to the probably much lower marginal private cost equals marginal private benefit of recycling. Okay, so see, all of this discussion of marginal this and marginal that, where things need to equal each other, is a reason that we as economists can critique things like mandatory recycling or take-back requirements for industries to take back their packaging. It all sounds good, you know. Hey, you put it in that box, you get to take back the box. Use it again. Okay, and provide industry an incentive to have the boxes be easily collectible. But see, there's an optimality question in there. Who knows where that box is going to go? Okay, what do you mean by mandatory recycling? Of what, where? Again, you don't know where that stuff is going to go before somebody's finished using it and then they want to get rid of it. And how much it's going to cost to move some of that stuff back into the recycling stream. And so you see there's no marginal considerations there in mandatory recycling or mandatory take-back requirements. So while they sound good, they're probably not likely to be very efficient because the quantity that's done will typically be much more. Well, depending on exactly what you mean by mandatory recycling and how you enforce it and how aggressively you enforce it, it's typically likely to be much more than the efficient amount. That's kind of sad when something's meant to make things work more efficiently, it makes them work less efficiently. Right? So we need to have some way to signal the cost of recycling, okay, as well as the total benefit of recycling, so that we know when it's worth it and when it should be reluctantly said that we just can't collect everything from everywhere and make it back into, process it into a way that it can then be reused. Okay, so if that subsidy is more than the net recycling cost, okay, that should be recycled. What's the net recycling cost? Well, how much more it costs to use recycled material than it costs to use the mine-provided material, right? It's the virgin, in the case of gold, the virgin ore material, right? So if the cycling subsidy, up to that point, again, it's not an all or nothing deal. Up to the quantity at which the subsidy is more than the net recycling cost, that's the efficient amount. Okay, if you go beyond that point, see, then the net recycling cost is likely to be more than the external benefits generated by recycling. Okay, I already mentioned the notion of the flat fee disposal amount. Let me get back into that a little bit and about what are the pros and cons of doing something about that. I think virtually all cities recognize that people throw away more stuff when you don't charge them more for throwing away more stuff. Okay, so why do so many cities, I think still the vast majority, charge households a set fee for trash disposal and not more if they throw away more, or not less if they throw away less? Well, I think the answer lies in the fact that we haven't found that invention yet, of that little caliper, or who knows what, that would make it economical, right, to charge by weight or volume. Now, there's one way that I'm going to mention in a minute. I'm not sure why more cities haven't adopted. I'm maybe missing something in terms of a cost that it entails. Again, maybe it's another story of inertia, or like in San Antonio, instead of charging more for more trash, we have constrained the amount of trash that people can throw away. Right? You get one of those containers that they will pick up and throw into the dumpster for your household that they'll pick up once a week, figuring, okay, that should be enough for anybody to use. And I haven't heard any widespread reports that that's not enough for some people. So maybe that was better. Maybe that was cheaper than than at least what seems to be the cheapest current method for per unit pricing of trash. Okay, it may lack some of the negative externalities of that. All right, so for some reason I get drier mouth from lecturing to a webcam than I do from from lecturing in front of people. So another drink is in order. Okay, so what are the different options? Right, you could weigh or volume measure trash, record it on a clipboard for each household or some electronic clipboard, and then bill people according to that. Well, that takes a lot of time, right? It takes more time, and also it's slow pickup, probably by a lot, and more than just grabbing it and throwing it in the back and driving to the next spot. Okay? Plus, if you do that, if you charge by weight or volume, what you've incentivized people to do is to throw the trash away by some method other than putting it in front of their own homes, right, where they'll be billed for it. Set it in front of their neighbor's house. Right, their neighbor says, I didn't put that much trash out. Why am I being billed for so much? Oh, my neighbor. He's been putting some of his trash in my trash can. That rat. Doggone it. And see, now we've got neighbors being mad at each other. Or if they don't know who did it, then now they're mad at the city for billing them for more than they think that they've thrown away, and they don't know why. And they're going to go dispute it somewhere. We have to create courts to dispute all that. Seems pretty tough to... But again, maybe they'll invent that... Get that hand up there. That little caliper, that big old arm they grab your trash with here in San Antonio. Put it in the back of the thing. Maybe they'll invent something that economically senses the amount of weight, and ultimately the main thing isn't weight, but volume, right? How much of the landfill it's going to take up, how fast it'll fill a landfill at that rate. All right, so what is one way that some cities are using that seems to, I think there's like Seattle, I think is still using the per bag method for pricing waste disposal service. And now maybe the reason is because it still doesn't incentivize littering, right? That's the other thing that I didn't mention. Okay, so one way is to sneak the trash in front of your neighbor's house, right? So that he get billed for it instead of you. The other way is to just toss it out in the middle of nowhere or wherever you can that you don't think anybody's looking, littering, to diminish the amount of money you're billed for trash disposal. For some reason, there must be some places that don't have ready trash disposal, or they are charged by the unit, because you see, there's sealed dumpsters around, right? They don't want people to throw their trash into their dumpster. Right? So, at least for households, it's not billed per unit. So some cities have said, okay, I think we can sort of solve this problem. It's not perfect, because who knows what they're going to put in the bags and how strong the bags are, and they may overstuff the bags and whatever. I mean, in addition to the littering risk, there's the problem of stuffed bags and torn bags and whatever. But that seems to be manageable, because some cities sell you bags that you can pick it up. Maybe another problem is that it's hard to have enough distribution points for selling the bags and collecting the revenue from that. Okay, so in other words, they don't send you a trash bill in those places. You pay for your trash disposal service by purchasing the bags that they'll pick up. If it isn't one of those bags, they'll pick up your trash. Okay, so that's a way to encourage people to throw away less. And one way to do that, not the only way, unfortunately, is encourage them to recycle more, right? To motivate them to recycle more because it saves on their trash. That's the only way we want them to diminish their trash volume. Well, no, let me correct that. It's not the only way. Because there's some other positive ways. We want consumers we don't want them to litter. We don't want to stick it in front of the neighbor's house. That's what I was thinking a minute ago. We don't want to incentivize them to do that, but it does. But what we do want them to do is think about, when I buy this product, eventually I want to throw away the package that it's in. Okay, if it's not recyclable by, in the blue can or by some easy method. Okay, so, we want people to think about, I don't want this so much packaging to be left over. So all things being the same, the consumers are going to start buying products that have less packaging left over when they're done with them. The manufacturers will eventually figure that out. Or they may figure it out immediately. It's like, okay, consumers are going to be more conscious to this now. So even before some of their lighter, less packaged products start selling better than others, they may get that message and say, look, let's figure out a way to get this packaging down to just the bare minimum that's necessary for safety or sanity or whatever the packaging aims to do, and maybe cut back a little bit on the rigidity of it or whatever that's used for marketing or for stacking it. And there's trade-offs. Manufacturers don't put all kinds of packaging on products excessive from their perspective. No, under the current conditions, the packaging to them is optimal. It may be optimal in terms of advertising things or all kinds of other things, and some of those will seem more expendable if consumers are less or more inclined to conserve on packaging in order to pay less for their trash disposal. All right, let me see where I'm at here on this rendition of things. Yes, I think at that point I am going to cease this non-renewables number 2, and in a few minutes start number 3. But for now, so long. This video will end, and of course you don't need to get back as soon as I do. I don't want to get number 3 done right away.